Hey guys, how are we doing? Welcome to Walking Boxing. It is Wednesday, November the 6th, 2024, and in America it is fight day, the main event. But I've said enough about that in the last couple of days. Trump versus Harris today or tomorrow, whenever it might be, we will know who the President of the United States is, which has an effect with all of us Western countries. So let's see what happens. All right, on to today's news. And look, first of all, we're going to cover today. Like last week, I did a few videos on the anniversary of Muhammad Ali's epic victory over George Foreman in Kinshasa, Zaire, back in 1974, 50-year anniversary. And we celebrated Muhammad Ali's performance and his strategy and the legacy and all that sort of stuff of Muhammad Ali. And there's probably one part of that was probably left out a little bit, and that was George Foreman himself. It was all sort of about Muhammad Ali. So this week the tables have turned a little bit, where we're actually going to celebrate Big George himself, because it is 30 years since he turned back the clock and won the world heavyweight title. What was that, 21 years after he first won it against Joe Frazier back in 1973. So I thought it was only appropriate that we celebrate George as well. And who could forget that epic knockout of Michael Moorer at the MGM Grand, behind on points, 45 years of age, against Michael Moorer, who'd won the belt against the lineal heavyweight champion Evander Holyfield. So there was no disputing that. Apparently Michael Moorer got cocky. Teddy Atlas was in his corner, was giving him instructions to maybe stay clear of George Foreman's right hand. Well, Michael Moorer wanted to be the first man to actually knock George Foreman out. Now, I don't know why he would say that, because obviously Muhammad Ali actually knocked George Foreman out, even though technically, I suppose, got up. Well, he did get up he was counted out and then got up. Michael Moorer apparently wanted to be the person to actually clean him up. So I don't know why you would want to do that to a 45-year-old man, by the way, but he did. So he paid the price. George Foreman hung in there, started to land the right hand, and then finally in the 10th round got the job done with a thunderous right hand to the chin to Michael Moorer, who didn't know what hit him. And that was it. And we had a new world heavyweight champion 20 years after he lost the belt to Muhammad Ali. So George Foreman, congratulations on that performance. I'm not sure it'll ever be beaten again. 45-year-old world champion, heavyweight champion, just crazy. So let's celebrate that this week. Now on to a little bit of myself again today. It's not really, I'm just going to say, there's not really, before I go on, a lot that was happening in the last 24 hours, because of course we want to cover everything as well. One thing I did actually, I've had a couple of people remind me, and I won't forget today, the other day when I said there's not really much left to celebrate this year apart from Usyk and Fury and Goodman and Inoue. But of course, our other man, Liam Paro, is defending his title in Puerto Rico against Richardson Hitchens. So apologies that I missed out on mentioning Liam. Of course we've got plenty to look forward to, and I just forgot about it, because there's so much that sort of goes on with dates and fights and cards and different promoters and fighters, and it's just all gets a bit confusing sometimes when you're covering it every day, and it all just sort of meshes into one sometimes, and I get a little bit of a mental blank. But there you go. So all the best to Liam Paro on December 7, I think it is. So on to today, on the more important things. That's me. What did we get up to yesterday? Pretty much the first six fights of my little amateur journey. I got to the end of 1986 when I was a 13-year-old. I'd just been beaten up 3 times in a row. The last 2 by an 18-year-old when I was only 13. Just turned 13, by the way. And this guy was 18. And as I said yesterday, I still don't know what actually happened. I was thinking about it yesterday after I made the video, thinking, what did actually happen about that? Obviously nothing, but how can an 18-year-old be sanctioned to fight a 13-year-old? Or not just that, but an 18-year-old be sanctioned to fight or allowed to fight in the junior, well, not even junior, schoolboy titles. Anyway, who knows? That was a long time ago, so we'll move on. Let's get into 1987. Now, this is probably the year where I started to just mature a little bit, get a few more fights, and yeah, probably get a little bit, well, I was already serious about it, but this is probably where it started to kick along, and I started to get a bit of momentum in what I was doing. Now, to start off, if you're not aware, back in 1987, the amateur wars started in Australia. Now, we had the Australian Boxing Association, or I think that's what it was called, but in Victoria, of course, the Victorian Amateur Boxing Association. And what actually happened was a lot of the trainers and people involved were fed up with the way that amateur boxing was being handled here in Australia, and there was a breakaway group, and it was led in Victoria by Mick Canavan, a great man. I used to go down to his gym all the time to spar. It's a beautiful man, and rest in peace, Mick. He died some years ago now, but just a great guy who always supported me and was nice to me and helped me when I went down there and sparred. So that was Mick Canavan. He was the head. And what actually happened is they did a breakaway group called the Victorian Amateur Boxing League, which is still going to this day, by the way. So in all those years, they still haven't made progress, but they broke away. The shit hit the fan. I was going to say about half the fighters left and went to the league, but I reckon it was more like 75%. It was a mass exodus, it really was. Now, I didn't know any better because I'm just a 13-year-old kid about to turn 14. I had no idea about all this sort of stuff. I just wanted to fight. So I was really oblivious to all this sort of stuff. I was just saying to Pat, well, when's our next fight, really? I didn't know, and again, didn't care. So all this is going on in the background, and what actually happened with the league is that they were told that you can break away, but you are not sanctioned or justified by any powers that be. You have no recognition whatsoever, but go off and do your thing. So what that meant was you couldn't obviously go to Commonwealth Games, Olympic Games, World Championships, nothing like that, just blackballed. So that was sort of going on in the background, but again, I didn't know all that was happening. I was just happy to get in there and fight. So I actually I think I had about 7 or 8 fights that year, and as well as a couple of exhibitions as well, because back then, you know, again, being 13, 14 years of age, a lot of trainers sort of a little apprehensive about chucking the kids in with other kids, and so what sort of happened was you might get an exhibition, and then you might fight later down the track if it's deemed to be even or whatever. And I had a couple of those. There's a couple of guys or kids that I fought that I already had exhibitions with, and Pat used to always say, just take it easy, do your thing, because we might fight these guys down the track and we don't want to scare them off. I didn't know any other way than straight ahead, though, if I'm being honest. So anyway, I had 8 or 9 fights, 7, 8, 9 fights, whatever it was that year, and I can't remember all the fights, but there's a couple that I distinctly remember, because it was also the year of my first Australian title tournament as a 14-year-old. But the first fight I can sort of remember after getting through a few earlier in the year was my hometown of Bendigo. First fight night, I don't know whether it's the first one I'd ever had or in a long time anyway. Pat actually put the show on. It was at the Bendigo Stadium, and we had a really good crowd. Actually, it was a ripper crowd. It was pretty much sold out. And I remember no internet or anything back then, by the way, and nothing else you could do to sort of advertise the fight, of course, or the tournament. Of course, the paper were involved, the Bendigo Advertiser, they supported the event. But I remember Pat saying, I'm going to pick you up, whatever this day was, and we're going to go around and put fight posters up around the town. Now, I had no idea. Oh, yeah, no worries, I'll come and give you a hand. So we're going around all the city of Bendigo, sticking up these posters everywhere we went, bus shelters and light poles and all this sort of stuff. Well, we got to one location, I'm pretty sure it might have been a bus shelter, and these days they would be referred to as Karens. Well, Karen and her husband pulled up out the window. Do you realise what you're doing is illegal? You can't do that. How dare you? You can't. I'm going to call the council and the police and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, geez, I'm 13 and 30. I think 14 it would have been then. So I'm a 14-year-old kid thinking, geez, what the hell is this? Some crazy lady screaming at us. And Pat was always ultra cool. He just sort of winked and said, no worries. He said, Lenny, get out and take it down. Meanwhile, there's probably another 200 posters around town that we'd stuck up. But Probably my first encounter with a legitimate Karen back in the day, because her eyes were just bulging out of her head, and not happy at all that that was happening. Actually, speaking of Karen, just to get off kilter a little bit, I actually have a little bit of experience with a mild Karen yesterday. I'll just quickly tell the story. I'm just going off script here a little bit, but I pulled over on the side of the road in between two driveways, so not in the driveway, just in between them. You know, you get one driveway, then a gap, and then another driveway. I parked in the middle of them, which I thought was quite safe and out of the road, not really hurting anyone. It was just a quiet street, no one around, you know. I got a knock on the window. I had to pull over to make a phone call, by the way, and I was just sort of thought it was easiest to pull over and take my time to talk. So I get a tap on the window, and this lady says, "Do you realise that you're parked in a yellow zone?" A what? A what zone? You're parked in a yellow zone. You know, you could get booked here, or you could get towed. And this is, I said, "Oh, all right, no worries." And she proceeds to read the council rule book of why I shouldn't be parked where it was in this quiet street in between two driveways with no one in sight. But anyway, I said, so after all that, so I said, "What you're telling me is you'd like me to move up 5 or 10 metres just so I'm out of the yellow zone?" She said, "Yes, that'd be great, thanks." I said, "No worries, peace, have a nice day. Trump 2024, man." That's what I said to her. I didn't say that because she reminded me of someone that would vote for Kamala Harris, but I said I wouldn't be political, so I'll move on. But anyway, back to the boxing. So the first tournament in Bendigo, we get to it, I fought at 51 kilos. And so obviously the weight was increasing by then. The previous year, what was I, 44, I think it was. So I'd gone up 7 kilos, so a bit of a growth spurt. I might have been about 5 foot by then, by the way. I was slowly growing. I might have been a bit taller, I can't remember. But so the Bendigo tournament's packed out, and I fought an Indigenous kid from Albury named David Jackson. And I didn't really care who I fought in Bendigo. I just wanted to fight in front of my hometown. The crowd's packed, all my mates from school are there. It's all happening. I'm just fighting this kid. Didn't even give him one second's thought. This kid from Albury. He's from Albury? Yeah, he's from Albury, New South Wales. So we're getting there in a fight, and I was actually, or thought I was sort of quite dominant. He was one of those guys who was just, that is a killer. Look in his eyes, didn't throw a lot of punches, but what he threw, he was trying to take you out. And of course, I'm doing my thing, thinking I'm all that in front of the hometown crowd. And next minute, or next second, boom! All I'm seeing was the ceiling spinning around, and I had no idea what was going on. I was being thrown around like a rag doll. And I had no idea what happened. I can't even remember the rest of the fight. I won, by the way, but I can't remember the rest of the fight. All I knew was afterwards that I'd won, and I couldn't remember it at all. And I watched the replay back, and what had happened was, because I got back to the corner, and Pat's like, "Are you okay?" It's in the second round. Pat's like, "You okay?" And apparently I said, yeah, I'm fine. Meanwhile, I've got Tweety Bird going around my head. So, go on, buddy. So yeah, after the fight, we watched it back on video, and what had actually happened is that I'd gone a bit cocky and, you know, pretty much sat on the ropes and was doing my thing, and he's just landed this right hand from hell right on my chin, just come from nowhere, boom. And you can see my knees buckle. You know, I'm doing the chicken dance, and can you believe this, as a 14-year-old, and that happens to a 14-year-old, the referee did not even budge, didn't step in, didn't give me a count, nothing. And I'm being thrown around like a rag doll, and he's just trying to finish me off, and I'm doing whatever I could to hang on, and I had no idea what was going on, because at this stage the world's just going round and round and round, and I managed to survive, and I came back in the third round, and actually gave him a count in the third round, if you can believe that, because I can't remember the fight at all. And yeah, as I said, that was my first state title. So I was a 14-year-old, I won the Victorian Amateur Boxing League state title. And look, in hindsight, it probably wasn't the title, because the association was still there, and I'm sure there was some really talented kids over there that I just didn't get to fight. I reckon I would have won it anyway, but anyway. But that was my first state title. Now the problem is that I'd done the weight a little bit hard, and as a 14-year-old kid, it's probably not a good thing to just be cutting, you know, weight all the time. It should, my opinion, you should be just focusing on learning the sport and getting the fights under your belt, not necessarily worrying about weight. And Pat obviously thought the same thing, because he said, look, if you're going to go to the Nationals at the end of the year, we probably need to go up to 54 kilos. So a week later, after that fight, and I probably still had bloody concussion when you think about it, in hindsight. Shouldn't have been fighting, but anyway, this is a long time ago, 1987. The year of the Blue Boys won the flag, by the way, 1987, Carlton Footy Club. But anyway, I've got a story about Carlton at some stage as well. I actually worked there for a year back in 2008, so I've got some really good stories to tell you about that. I was a boxing coach down there at Carlton. So anyway, that'll be in a later episode. But so a week later, we ventured down to Melbourne, and I can't remember where in Melbourne that it was, and I fought a young guy from Orbost named Jamie Cummins, who'd just beaten one of my stablemates a few weeks earlier, I think it was. A tall, rangy southpaw, good solid 54 kilos, and I beat him as well. So that was a lot easier than the fight before, I can tell you, the week before. So in the space of a week, I'd won the state 51 kilo title and the state 54 kilo title. Now, I thought I was king of the world, having won a title of any sorts. You know, I didn't know it was just the breakaway Victorian Boxing League amateur title, or junior schoolboy, whatever it was. So I had those 51 and 54 kilo state belts under my belt, those medals under my belt, and proceeded to the Australian titles, the first ones I'd obviously been to, and they took place in Lake Dartmouth, I think, or Lake Dartmouth, whatever you want to call it. And I had 2 fights from memory as a 54 kilo. Now, the first fight I actually fought Jamie Cummins again. Back then you fought a lot of those same opponents. It was just the way it went. There wasn't a lot of people around. So I fought him in the first fight because there's an A and B team that went, and got the unanimous decision again over him this time, and fought a Western Australian in the final, and he was another Indigenous guy, tough. I was thinking, geez, this guy, he looked pretty mean. I think he might have even had a tattoo, if you can believe that. I'm 14-year-old fighting a kid who I swear he had a tattoo. But anyway, it was for the Australian schoolboy, or no, it wasn't schoolboy, it must have been junior, because I didn't win any schoolboy titles. But anyway, so I fought this guy from Western Australia, and I remember the night before lying in bed thinking, I'm fighting for the Australian title tomorrow. I could actually be an Australian champion. Now, again, I didn't realise there was the association also doing their Australian titles, and there was another guy in another universe that was fighting for the same medal that I was fighting for. But again, I didn't care. I was fighting for it, and I remember lying awake all night just thinking, geez, I'm fighting for the Australian title. I could be the best fighter in Australia. Can you believe it? So, so I fought the guy from Western Australia, and it was not the most exciting fight. He was a real solid guy. So Pat said, look, get on your toes, use your jab, move, use your speed, all that sort of stuff. So it wasn't really an engaging fight. I just boxed and moved the whole fight and won a decision. So that was my first ever Australian title, Victorian Amateur Boxing League Australian title in Lake Dartmouth, Victoria. So it was a great experience. Look, I just couldn't believe I had the Victorian gear on. I was getting presented with a belt. I just remember sitting in the audience watching all these gun amateurs that I'd been watching over the last couple of years and had really great admiration for, and a little bit starry-eyed to see all these fighters, and it was just a great experience. It really was. And the whole tournament was actually done in a circus tent. It was I don't even know where Lake Dartmouth is, by the way, but it was in a circus tent out in some field or something, but I just remember it was a really well-run tournament. We had everything we needed. And what was good about it was a really good community amongst the league fighters and the trainers and the gyms, all that sort of stuff, because of course these guys had broken away together for the same reason. So there wasn't a lot of egos, at that stage anyway, not a lot of those tracksuit collectors that you get these days who are just interested in themselves and how many tracksuits they can collect on how many trips they go on, not really interested in progressing the sport and all this sort of stuff. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But I just remember getting home just being as absolutely proud as punch that I was the best fighter in Australia at that weight, at that age. So it was quite an experience. And again, I can't remember exactly how many fights I had, but it might have been 7, 8, maybe 9, something like that anyway. So I was well on my way in the boxing ranks at that time. So that was the first year of my Australian titles. I would fight in the next 2 Australian titles. I'll get to that. So it looks like we're probably going to go year by year until we get to some of the juicier stuff later, guys. But that is it for today's episode. Hope you found it a little bit entertaining. I'm just sort of, again, just going year by year, and we'll just give a few different experiences on different things. But that was my first experience as an official Australian champion in the amateur ranks. So we'll go on to 1988 in the next episode, unless there's obviously something else that's a little bit more important. So guys, that is it for today. Hope you have a great election day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.